Welcome to Medieval Chronicles 1066. In this series, an in-depth exploration of the diverse lives of various social classes in medieval England is undertaken. This episode will focus on the peasantry, a demographic that constituted the majority of the population and whose labor was indispensable for sustaining the societal structure of the time. In medieval England, one's social status influenced nearly every aspect of life. It determined the food consumed, travel limitations, level of education, and even life expectancy. This episode will delve into the lives of peasants, those who toiled relentlessly in the fields to ensure the survival of their communities and the grand estates they served. The feudal system was the dominant social and economic structure of medieval England, fundamentally shaping the lives of peasants. This system was based on the hierarchical relationship between the king, nobles, knights, and peasants, all bound by mutual obligations and duties. At the apex of this hierarchy was the king, who owned all the land and granted portions of it, known as fiefs, to his most loyal subjects, the nobles. In return for this land, the nobles, or barons, pledged military service, loyalty, and financial support to the king. The nobles, in turn, granted smaller portions of their land to knights, who swore to defend the realm and the nobles' interests. These knights managed the land and the peasants who worked it. In this way, the land was parceled out in a cascading hierarchy, with each level owing service and allegiance to the one above. At the base of the feudal pyramid were the peasants, who worked the land. There were various categories of peasants, including freemen, who paid rent for their land, and villeins or serfs, who were bound to the land and owed labor services to their lords. This relationship between lords and peasants was reciprocal. The lord provided protection and justice, while the peasants provided labor and a portion of their produce. The early Middle Ages, spanning from approximately 500 to 1000 AD, was a period of transformation following the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. During this era, England saw the establishment of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. The lives of peasants in these nascent kingdoms were characterized by subsistence farming and local trade. King Alfred the Great, who reigned from 871 to 899, is renowned for his efforts to defend his kingdom against Viking invasions and for his administrative reforms. Alfred's legal and educational reforms indirectly impacted the peasantry by promoting a more organized and stable society. He encouraged the establishment of burhs, fortified settlements that served as centers of local trade and defense, thereby providing some measure of security for the rural populace. During the early Middle Ages, the open field system began to take root. Peasants worked on strips of land in large communal fields, a system that facilitated cooperative farming and resource sharing. The manorial system also emerged, with peasants, often serfs, working on the lord's domain in exchange for protection and the right to cultivate their own plots of land. The manorial system established a hierarchical relationship between lords and peasants. The lord of the manor held significant power, but his responsibilities included providing justice and protection. Peasants, while bound to the land, had certain rights to their own plots, which they could pass down to their descendants. The Viking invasions in the 9th and 10th centuries brought both turmoil and opportunities. The constant threat of raids forced communities to band together for mutual protection, but it also disrupted agricultural cycles and led to periods of famine. Over time, however, some Vikings settled and integrated into local societies, contributing to cultural and economic exchanges. The church played a pivotal role in the lives of early medieval peasants. Churches and monasteries were not only spiritual centers but also hubs of learning and charity. Monastic lands were often cultivated by local peasants, and religious festivals provided breaks from the arduous agricultural calendar. While major peasant revolts were less common in the early Middle Ages, there were instances of local uprisings. These were usually prompted by oppressive taxation or excessive demands from landlords. The outcomes varied, with some revolts leading to temporary concessions while others were brutally suppressed, reinforcing the power of the feudal lords. The High Middle Ages, from 1000 to 1300, witnessed significant agricultural, social, and economic changes. The Norman conquest of 1066, led by William the Conqueror, had profound effects on the English peasantry. William's reign, from 1066 to 1087, saw the implementation of the feudal system, which further formalized the obligations and duties of peasants to their lords. One of William's most notable legacies is the Domesday Book, completed in 1086. This extensive survey documented landholdings and resources across England, providing a detailed account of the peasant population and their economic activities. The Domesday Book reveals the extent of land under cultivation and the various obligations owed by peasants, such as labor services and rents. The High Middle Ages also saw technological advancements in agriculture. The introduction of the heavy plough and the three-field system increased productivity. The three-field system, which rotated crops to maintain soil fertility, allowed for more efficient use of land and led to surplus production. This surplus enabled trade and the growth of markets, gradually improving the economic conditions of some peasants. King Henry II, reigning from 1154 to 1189, implemented significant legal reforms that affected the peasantry. The development of common law under Henry II provided a more uniform and predictable legal framework. While primarily benefiting the nobility and townspeople, these reforms indirectly influenced peasants by creating a more stable and orderly society. The expansion of markets during the High Middle Ages provided peasants with new opportunities to sell their surplus produce and crafts. Market towns grew, and some peasants, through hard work and ingenuity, were able to improve their social and economic status. The growth of trade also contributed to the rise of a merchant class, further diversifying the social structure. The reign of King John, from 1199 to 1216, is often associated with the signing of the Magna Carta in 1215. While the Magna Carta primarily addressed the concerns of the nobility and church, its broader implications eventually impacted all levels of society, including the peasantry. The document's emphasis on the rule of law and protections against arbitrary actions by the king laid the groundwork for future legal reforms. During the High Middle Ages, there were several significant peasant uprisings. One notable example is the revolt led by Hereward the Wake against William the Conqueror in the late 11th century. Though ultimately unsuccessful, such revolts highlighted the peasants' dissatisfaction with oppressive feudal practices and excessive taxation. The suppression of these revolts often led to even harsher measures, demonstrating the delicate balance of power between lords and peasants. The Fourth Lateran Council of 1215, convened by Pope Innocent III, also had implications for the peasantry. The council's decrees on marriage, tithes, and heresy affected daily life and reinforced the church's influence over the populace. The requirement for annual confession and communion increased the church's moral oversight, impacting social norms and personal behavior. The late Middle Ages, from 1300 to 1500, were marked by significant upheavals and challenges. The Great Famine of 1315 to 1317, caused by excessive rain and poor harvests, led to widespread starvation and highlighted the vulnerability of the peasant class. This period of hardship was followed by the Black Death, which decimated the population of Europe between 1347 and 1351. During the reign of King Edward III, from 1327 to 1377, the Black Death had profound effects on English society. The dramatic reduction in population led to labor shortages, which in turn increased the bargaining power of peasants. Many landlords, desperate for labor, offered better terms to attract workers. This shift began to undermine the feudal system, as peasants sought higher wages and better working conditions. One of the most significant events of the late Middle Ages was the Peasants' Revolt of 1381, during the reign of King Richard II. This revolt was fueled by economic hardship, high taxes, and oppressive labor laws. Led by figures such as Wat Tyler and John Ball, the peasants demanded the abolition of serfdom, fair rents, and the end of oppressive labor practices. Although the revolt was eventually suppressed, it forced the young King Richard II to confront the grievances of the lower classes. The rebellion also accelerated the decline of serfdom in England. The reign of King Henry IV, from 1399 to 1413, saw continued social and economic changes. The aftermath of the Black Death and subsequent labor shortages led to increased mobility among peasants. Many were able to negotiate better terms or move to towns and cities in search of work. The decline of feudal obligations and the rise of a more market-oriented economy gradually transformed rural society. The Wars of the Roses, a series of civil wars for control of the throne of England, from 1455 to 1487, further impacted the peasantry. The conflict between the houses of Lancaster and York disrupted agricultural production and caused widespread devastation. Many peasants were drawn into the conflict, either through conscription or as mercenaries, further highlighting their importance in the broader societal struggles. The late Middle Ages also witnessed continued advancements in farming techniques and tools, further increasing agricultural productivity. Innovations such as improved ploughing methods and the use of crop rotation helped sustain the peasant economy despite the challenges posed by climatic fluctuations and social disruptions. By the late Middle Ages, the traditional feudal system was giving way to early forms of a market economy. The commutation of labor services for monetary rents became more common, allowing peasants greater freedom to manage their own time and resources. This shift laid the foundation for the transformation of the English countryside and the rise of a more mobile and economically diverse rural population. Women in peasant communities played crucial roles in both household management and agricultural labor. They were responsible for tasks such as spinning, weaving, brewing, and caring for livestock. Despite their contributions, women often had limited legal rights and were subject to the authority of their husbands or fathers. The late Middle Ages saw some improvement in women's legal status, particularly through widowhood, which granted them more autonomy over property and business dealings. The late Middle Ages also experienced significant religious changes, including the rise of movements like Lollardy, which criticized the wealth and corruption of the church. These movements sometimes found support among peasants, who were disillusioned with the established religious order. The suppression of such movements highlighted the tension between the desire for reform and the existing power structures. Despite their crucial role, the contributions of medieval peasants have often been overlooked. It was not until 2015 that a memorial for the peasant revolt was erected in London. This recognition is a small step toward acknowledging the significance of the peasant class in medieval history. Peasants were the foundation of medieval society, providing the labor and produce that sustained both noble and religious establishments. Their stories of resilience, innovation, and occasional rebellion are essential to understanding the complexities of medieval life. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the lives of medieval peasants. Be sure to check out our other videos on life and significant events in the Middle Ages and share your thoughts in the comments below. Please help out our channel by liking and subscribing to Medieval Chronicles 1066, a YouTube channel dedicated to bringing you more fascinating medieval history documentaries.